So, we are here live with Jon Horvath, and we are going to talk about some of his recent work. And first off, I just want to welcome everybody who is on the call in the meeting. And so, we're going to talk to Jon today about his work. You're going to be able to ask questions to him directly if you're on the call, and we can just jump right in. So I just want to quickly say that I'm Mike Rippey. I'm the digital archivist and multimedia producer at Yield at the Snite Museum of Art. I run Yield Magazine, which is the project that we're working from. And I met Jon at SPE Midwest last fall, and we started, I had a brief introduction, and I saw he had a presentation there on his work, and I was intrigued and thought he would be a great candidate for the artist residency, and started contacting him through email, and that's kind of where we're at. He's decided to do the residency this summer, and that's kind of where we're at right now, and we're going to talk to him about his work and find out more. So, Jon, if you want to introduce yourself, and we'll just jump right into the project you want to discuss also.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for inviting me to do this. I'm Jon Horvath. I'm located in Milwaukee. An artist working a lot with photography, but introducing a lot of other mediums into my practice. I teach at the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design, and I think for the most part we'll probably talk about my most recent project, which spans a lot of different media, but it's called This Is Bliss. And it's situated in a small town in Idaho called Bliss, Idaho. And I think we can probably get into some more specifics about that project as we move on. But that's basically who I am and where I am. And here I am.
Great. So, let's just jump right into the project. If you can kind of give us a brief kind of general idea of how it started and kind of, how you kind of conceptually came to the idea of doing this to begin with.
Yeah, so it started kind of in earnest in 2014, and it's continually evolving. So even as I sit here today, it's close to being complete, but there's a few other kind of gestures I want to introduce into it, and I don't even necessarily know what shape those will officially take. But the way that I came to make the work was I was traveling across country alone in my car, headed to Portland in the late summer of 2013. And I had made plans to visit a friend that lives in Boise, and picked him up, and we went to Portland for a few days, and then on my way back, dropped him off and headed back for a year of teaching. And this kind of coincided in a moment in my life that I think I would just characterize as a little bit of a starting over moment. And I was doing a lot of just kind of soul searching and personal evaluation, and I was definitely going through transition in my life. So it ended up being a little bit of a metaphorical road trip as well. It was kind of nice just to be on the road and in a moment of discovery. And on my way back, in the middle of the Idaho desert, it was a very hot day, pretty barren landscape. There wasn't much around whatsoever. And I saw just a highway exit sign that said Bliss with an arrow pointing, and from the highway it looked like it was pointing to nothing. So I thought, well, that's kind of fascinating, and I like to act on those little moments of surprise. So I got off the freeway and encountered a small town that I quickly learned was populated just by about 300 people. I got into a conversation with one of the local residents, and he started telling me about the town, its history, its kind of current state. I think it's fair to say that, economically and in terms of population, it's probably in a bit of a decline. And a lot of that was brought about as a result of the building of the interstate, I-84, that passed through town. Bliss was one time kind of a necessary crossroads. So if you were a trucker or just a road traveler or vacationer or whatever your reason for being on the road was, you kind of had to go through this location. So it was very much supported by that travel. And now if you pass by, you're probably just filling up your tank really quickly, maybe grabbing a quick lunch, but you're heading on your way. So it's really, I think, kind of struggled to maintain itself since the mid 1970s. So I kind of saw this moment of parallel, maybe, where I was going through this this searching process, starting over process. I had this landscape that was charged by a name, and that's all I knew it by at that point. It was just called Bliss. So I kind of thought, after having a conversation with that resident, maybe this was a place to return to and try to unearth some new understanding of what that word might mean. And through my research, I came to learn a lot about the general region and its history, how it kind of ties into the history of the westward expansion and Manifest Destiny. It's situated on the Old Oregon Trail. Some of the first railroads in the country intersect the town. So I came to understand that there was like this big narrative that kind of ran through the location, that was kind of rooted in maybe notions of American idealism. But then there was its individual contemporary state, which, at least on the surface, maybe felt not so blissful by its name. So I really was kind of struck by that polarity and that complexity, and I wanted to investigate it further and then see how I could relate to it, I guess, in a similar place in my life. So that's kind of like maybe the broad-reaching conceptual point of departure. And then I came to know people in town, build relationships. I've been there 5 different trips now. The first 3 trips were 10 days each. They were almost like mini residencies unto themselves. And then as I spent more time in the town and built up some of these relationships, the project just really evolved and expanded in ways I never really would have predicted, to the point where there's pieces in the project that have collaborative elements with town residents, many of whom, maybe all of whom, are not particularly versed in contemporary art. And it was really kind of a fascinating moment to try to build that connection with residents in this place via kind of creating some gestures and pieces together. And then there's this component that's very traditional and photographic in nature, where it's me as kind of like starting as an outsider, coming into town as an observer, getting an understanding of the place, the people, the surface of the town, its history. But as the project expands, it really becomes more personalized and kind of integrated with the community.
Yeah, that's one of the things that when I saw the presentation at SPE, that's what drew me in, was this idea that, you came across this place, you started doing more and more research about the location, there was a lot that happened before you actually started the project. And then once you got in there, it kind of evolved and changed, and you became more and more connected with the people that live there. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how I see, like you mentioned, like a mini residency. That's kind of what I imagined could happen with the residency this summer, is that once you're there, do some research beforehand. I mean, there's some significant things that have happened in both those areas, under East and West. Underkeast, has a connection with the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King Jr. There was, a big conference that they had there with Father Hesburgh, and then out west, with the Native American reservations out there and the bison range and the history that's associated with all that also. So yeah, there's a lot to know about the area before you even kind of set foot on the actual land. So that's, hearing your presentation, it just really, you really, and I think it's because of this background you have with the writing and, literature, you really it feels like you're really getting invested in the story of the place. So
yeah, I think that's true. And, when I think back on the time before I returned to Bliss at all, I didn't really know what I was getting into or what I would encounter. I didn't know if I would be making these connections, embraced by people in town, or, kind of slowly, just moving through, And so I kind of went there with a list of possibilities. Like I did a lot of just research into the area, and I don't know how many of those things I actually even acted on, but it was good just to kind of create a mental framework for how to enter into the place. And there's something too about the buildup of being on the road in advance of getting there. Like just, I'm excited to be going to Montana. There's going to be like this 2-day trip where, it feels like even that undertaking is building up to this moment of arrival. And it's kind of fascinating. Like in many respects, I'm somewhat introverted. I'm, a little bit quieter of an individual, but, when I got to town, that kind of fell away, which was great. So I'm really excited about, how that preparation can feed into these moments of interaction. And then maybe it's just like tearing up a script, you learn all the lines, you tear it up, and then whatever the outcome is something you never really would have, anticipated. So.
Right. And I think as an outsider coming in, having done some research, it shows, the local population that, you care about this place. You care before you even got there. So then when you start making these connections, it really, I think, draws them in, and it makes them want to be involved and, help you in some way make sure that it's kind of an accurate kind of understanding of what they're really going through.
Yeah, absolutely. I went there very conscious of the fact that, like I can't go there and like tell the story of this town without like knowing it. Plus, that's not something I was really interested in. Is like coming away with some sort of like statement about the town or definitive, kind of position. Again, it's not the geography I come from. It's not the daily walk I make. More so, I was going there again to interact and see maybe where they could lead me, and that's where it ended up becoming somewhat of this personal hybrid documentary project. Is at first I was wondering what role I might even have being represented in the project itself, and then that came to be a possibility. So I think a lot about that position of being the outsider, arriving uninvited, and then being there for 10 days or 2 weeks and then leaving. There's a lot of complexities in that and problematic things. So as much as I can bring the voice of the place directly into the project, that was something I was really interested in. And that's where those collaborative pieces came from, really, is, again, there's an individual that I encountered that in town is locally known as the Prince. I love that the place had its kind of own mythology. And he and I became friends, and he's a very intellectual individual with a great ability for writing. So he wrote something for the project that ended up being kind of the introductory statement. And instead of, again, me writing that, the viewer is introduced to the work from somebody from town directly. So that was exciting for me.
So let's go ahead and look at some of the photographs, and what we'll do is we'll have you kind of get involved with, how, the process of creating the photographs, maybe some things about what happened before, during, after, like how that kind of image kind of came about.
Yeah, I'll do my best.
What I'd like to try to do is finish with your description of the image and, talk about, the qualities of it, and then try to get some of the people that are watching to come in and maybe ask some other questions, and we'll see how that goes. And then we'll have like another short Q&A kind of at the end to kind of, for people to throw whatever questions they want at you, generally.
Great. So you'll be showing me an image?
Well, I was hoping you would have some images, but I can definitely bring the images up.
I can.
Just give me a second. I can pull some images up.
Okay, great.
It'll be directly from your website, so.
Yeah, that's just fine.
So let's start with the one that I've seen. I think it was the Ain't Bad. They put this one out on their website. Yeah. Let me get this one up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, talk about this image and kind of how it came about and what other information you want to share with us.
Yeah, I love, there's actually like this really beautiful and poetic moment that precedes this image. And again, like there was really no way for me to directly get that into the project. But you can't really tell by looking at the image, but I'm actually standing in an old desert cemetery. It's one of the oldest cemeteries in the region. And I was just kind of given a tip by a resident at the diner to go out into the desert hills, and I would eventually find a cemetery that would have very old grave markers from early to mid 1800s, and maybe that would be something that would strike my curiosity. And so I was there, and I traveled with another individual that was lending a hand, and we were kind of alone in this desert cemetery in the middle of nowhere, and then all of a sudden a pickup truck arrived, and this individual and his wife were in the pickup truck, and both very much alive, but they were there to water, as I understood it, their own grave plots. So they came with flowers and they put them on some grave plots in the cemetery, but then they went to their own, which were already there, and put some flowers down there, and then watered those flowers. And I thought, wow, that's kind of amazing that they're leaving a memorial for themselves, yet they're still here. So I witnessed that, and then he came back to the truck, and I had actually recognized him. I met him just a few days earlier at high school graduation, and I was introduced to him, or he was introduced to me as the longest living resident of Bliss. His name was Eldon. And in all my time there, and again, there's only 300 people, but in all my time there, I believe I did not meet anybody that was indeed older, so I think he can be crowned with that. He is the oldest man in Bliss, watering his own gravesite. So we were just talking, and then, he kind of ducked his head down, and I wasn't there to make a portrait. I wasn't there to interact with people, living people whatsoever. And this was one of the more, I guess, serendipitous moments of portraiture in the project. A lot of the images where I am actually photographing people, were arranged. We'd set up a time, but this was one that was just kind of handed to me. And when I scanned the negatives and started working the files, I fell in love with it immediately. I love the little orange pen in his pocket protector, the little tag that's sticking out from his pants. But then I also love this kind of mysterious element of like the gaze diverted, looking down at the ground, also almost kind of with humility as well. That's kind of maybe how I come to interpret it. So, but yeah, that one actually does have kind of a fantastic backstory, or at least lead-in story to it. Black Eldon, the oldest man in Bliss.
So let's see if we can get one of our viewers on, and maybe they have some other questions about the image. So I have Chris Pugh and Clarissa Bonet, and I hope I've said both of their names correctly. But I'm going to allow them to talk, and if they want to ask a question, feel free. If not, we'll just give it a couple seconds, and then we'll move on. So Chris or Clarissa, if you want to ask Jon a question, feel free about the image, and then we can move on to the next image.
I guess. Oh.
Hi, Clarissa.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. I guess I have a more general question, maybe. Do you still hear me?
I hear you.
I hear you.
Okay. My screen went blank, so. Oh, I guess that happens when I talk. I guess I have a kind of general question, and I kind of maybe mentioned it to you once before, but I kind of find it really interesting how you integrate different types of strategies of photographing in terms of portrait, landscape. Some seem constructed, some seem found, and then also different kinds of cameras, like some digital, some film. I think a different, if I'm not mistaken, multiple formats. Like, can you talk about maybe throughout the project, like how you, maybe the choices that you make, how you interweave those? Because I think it's like one thing I really love about this project in particular. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And that, that same premise even expands into other media altogether. There's sculptural elements in the project and painting. And but to answer that directly, there's kind of a narrative strategy that informed that decision. So I studied English literature as an undergrad, and I'm by no means an authority and able to talk about any of this stuff. But one thing I do recall is being introduced to a text called Winslow, Ohio. Winsburg, Ohio. See, I'm no authority. One of the formats, I shouldn't say one of the formats, the format of that text is called a short story cycle. And basically what it is a compilation of a series of standalone stories that each has their own, each has kind of like the ability to be a story unto themselves, but then when compiled can assemble themselves into something greater. So, the whole can be greater than the sum of its parts. And that was a format that I came to be inspired by and allowed the project to run parallel, because there were all of these different facets to the place, to my encounters with the place, that I wanted to be able to dive into and explore further. And it seemed very narrow for me to try to direct all of my interests into one sort of streamlined photographic form.
Mm-hmm.
And the ability to embrace that expansion allowed for that kind of variation to situate itself in the project. So like there's a wet plate component where, I did a typology of broken beer bottles and tumbleweed that I collected from the side of the road. And, I could have done that, I guess, with a medium format, color, digital, or film, and scan those pictures. But then like the voice of those pictures ended up being very dissimilar from a lot of the other pictures that I was making, but it became complicated by the fact, or it would be complicated by the fact if they all kind of looked the same. It's like a different gesture, but they're all trying to look the same way. So instead of going that route, I tried to go the other route and embrace that variation and see how far I could kind of stretch the limitations of this assembly of gestures, and really just pick the right tool to match the gesture that I was trying to make. So for like the beer bottles and the tumbleweed, it wasn't necessarily just arbitrary, like I want wet plate in here somewhere. I was thinking about the history of kind of specimen collecting and the era of some of these expeditions west, and I was trying to think of, a photographic form that might be closer in proximity in terms of just the era of those expeditions. So that was, a moment for me to look at more antiquated photographic processes. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, no, totally.
Okay.
Yeah, so it seems like you think a lot about, like there must be some sort of distance, right, between the idea and the execution of the idea. So, I mean, right? I mean, it seems like I'm wondering, like, how much distance is there? Like, is it because you have this opportunity to go and spend like a couple weeks somewhere and then kind of almost like for 6 months or however long till the next time you visit, kind of almost like meditate on those experiences and look back at the photographs and like think about maybe a different or specific gesture you want to make the next time you go back? Like, is that, I think, like an important part of the process for making this work?
Yeah, it was unintentional. When I began the project, like I was thinking it would just be one trip that was 10 days long, and I would just do as much as I could in those 10 days and then move on. But what you're talking about, like, definitely presented itself. So, a lot of the works are, kind of studio experiments in Milwaukee that are informed by my interactions with people there. In some respects, my time in town is also research as much as it is making. So it seems ridiculous to me when I like describe this, but I didn't make like the wet plate work in Bliss. I actually bubble wrapped, 60 broken beer bottles from the side of the highway and UPS'd them to myself, which is kind of ridiculous. But, I didn't know how to do wet plate. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with that material. So like if you were to come to my studio, there's kind of like a lot of stuff there that's more potential than anything. And some of it I don't know what I'm going to do with, or if I'll do anything with. And then, as long as I'm surrounded by it, it might trigger some sort of idea that finds its way into the project. So there are things that are definitely responsive to the location specifically, where I may need to, like if I'm making photographs in town, like obviously that image of Eldon, I had to be on site for that. There's other things like historically that I'm inspired by in that region that became kind of site-specific performance pieces. So I needed to do those on site. But then when I make a series of paintings, that doesn't need to be done there. And in some respects, there's kind of an interesting, as you put it, like distance it's interesting what distance can allow for. You know, it's not hurried. It can become a little bit more deliberate. So
Definitely.
I'm going to cycle through some of the other images that you have on your website. And if Clarissa wants to stay on, and if I'll end up stopping at one of the photographs, and we can talk about that also. But I want to make sure people get to see as much as we can. So
yeah.
let me get back to sharing this.
And for anybody watching, I have a new website coming soon.
Cool.
This is painfully.
You should share that on the Facebook page with this video, so that when people watch the video, they'll see the link. So
yeah, hopefully in the next week or two.
Cool. So we see this photo here. Let's move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Clarissa, if you see something that you want to discuss too, just shout out. And John, same for you. These are your photographs, so you have a lot more information that's embedded with you that we have no idea about. So
well, one thing that's interesting, like cycling through them, is geographically, the town, the main part of the town is very small. So I think maybe the stretch of highway there's actually two interstate entrance exit points, and I think the stretch of highway is maybe a mile, 3/4 of a mile. So it is kind of fascinating is if you were to go on site and just walk down that stretch of road, you would see most of these pictures. It would be a good tour, a good walking tour, I think. I probably walked the town, a good 30, 40 times, which is an interesting exercise in and of itself, trying to find new things in a very small location. That was actually one of the kind of challenges I gave to myself was in a location so small, I guess, geographically, how much can you unearth and dig up with an extended period of time? So that was kind of a fun thing, but also very challenging.
Yeah. I think I would imagine a lot of photographers go through that idea of like, I have this limited area. Even in the places that you live, you kind of always think about, I could probably do some kind of project based on the area where I live. And then you start driving around for a while and you're like, I don't know, this is a little limited.
Right.
So let's keep going. I want to get to this photograph that we use to kind of spotlight this event.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you could talk about this a little more too.
Yeah. So this was a dog named Fruit Snacks that I was introduced to, and I was seated in the Outlaws and the Angels bar, and I was just introduced to one of the local residents. He walked in, and he walked in with the dog, and you can very slightly just see right at the kind of the bottom center part of the picture that the dog is actually sitting on a bar stool, and it was an intentional use of flash here because I kind of wanted more of a stark image, and I kind of wanted to eliminate the environment as much as I could. And it's interesting because as much as this is an image that to me feels kind of aggressive, this is the sweetest dog. You just kind of like put it down on your knee uninvited. But the owner wanted to show me how its teeth had become ground down, I think by chewing on bones that it had found out in the desert. So he just had grabbed the snout of the dog and pulled up its mouth. And this kind of speaks to Clarissa's question also. I didn't want to make a definitive choice in terms of format in advance of knowing even what the project ultimately would be. So I regularly shoot medium format film, but I didn't limit myself from walking around with a digital camera just in case. So this was one image that did come with a digital camera with just an onboard flash. And I guess the reason I'd point to that, maybe that's not always the most interesting thing to talk about the technology, but it allowed for these unpremeditated moments to kind of present themselves in the project. So I could be very, very quick and responsive, and we didn't have to set this image up necessarily. I just had a camera on hand, pulled the dog's mouth up, and very quickly I was able to make that picture. So.
Yeah, I was looking at this picture last night, and my wife was sitting next to me, and she said, "What are they doing to that dog?" And I said, I think they're just trying to show the teeth of the dog. And I've done this before in the past too, where I want to see how the dog's teeth look and make sure they're healthy. And yeah, once you pull those lips back, they look very aggressive, and
Yeah.
So yeah, I had to.
It's this weird, there's there's these like two moments of aggression, because like one, it's like, okay, you see a dog showing its teeth at you, that's one thing, but then the owner drawing up the mouth of the dog is this other form of kind of threat or aggression. So it's this weird kind of complexity of what's actually what's actually happening in this picture. But it was really just to kind of demonstrate the teeth being grinded down.
So let's pick one more picture, and if John, if you have something specific you wanted to talk about, let me know.
Well, maybe I can talk a little bit about a collaborative work that came out of the.
Okay.
A lot of the images that are on my site now, and it really is kind of like in need of a major update, because a lot of the images that kind of are representing the project on my site come from my earliest activities in town, where I am still kind of getting to know the place and still very much in an observer role. I do have a PDF I can reference. If I do my share screen thing here, will that work?
Let me turn mine off, and then you can share your screen.
Okay. Well, the first thing that's actually going to pop up is, you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is just like an installation view of how the project, in all of its kind of disparate parts, comes to be represented. Again, I'm really interested in this kind of nonlinearity, the idea that each gesture can kind of be its own thing, but then after like a viewer kind of takes in the totality of it, hopefully it all coalesces into some altogether new thing. But in terms of maybe a collaborative moment, excuse me. Actually, it's right at the beginning, sorry. So I'll point to this image, which also is kind of, it's in that Ain't Bad post, and it's been referenced a few times. And this was actually one of the challenges that I encountered just in terms of how do I represent the work to an unknown public is, so this reference is a postcard that was actually made in collaboration between myself and one of the town residents. Actually, the first individual that I met on my very first time through town, his name was Buck Hall. And when I returned, he was my only contact, and I called him up and I said, Buck, what do I need to do when I'm in town? What do I need to see? And his, the options that he provided for me were very limited. He basically said I could, go to one of the diners because he thought they had Wi-Fi there, and I could maybe just sit on my laptop for the whole time I'm in town. But after we kind of got through, further into the conversation, he said, well, one thing that you can do if you drive down this road, park your car after you get over the overpass, look up to the side of the cliff, and then call me and tell me what you see. And I honestly couldn't see it. So he came down and pointed up to the side of the cliff, and he said, do you see the profile of the old Indian chief in the side of the cliff? And it was daylight at the time, and I said, oh yeah, I can see what you're talking about. And he said, now here's what you're going to do is you're going to come back here when there's a full moon, and you're going to make a picture, and you're going to make a postcard, and then you're going to sell that postcard for millions of dollars. And we had just kind of a good laugh at that idea in that moment. But this was one of the things, again, to Clarissa's question, where distance came in. It was my third trip a year later, almost a year and a half later, that I returned in the winter, and it coincided with a moment when we had a supermoon, and the supermoon was in the right part of the sky. So I showed Buck this capture I made one night, and said, is this kind of the picture you had in mind? And he said, yeah, that looks pretty good. So we produced this postcard, and now if you go to Bliss, you can purchase this postcard in the local diner and at one of the saloons. Bliss, as far as I know, never had its own postcard previously. And so I kind of loved the idea that, through this interaction with this resident, that kind of references some of the town's own identity and own mythology, we were able to produce this piece that now actually lives on site in town, and anybody just coming through can buy this postcard. So this is the type of thing that very much was not anticipated well in advance of the project. Again, I didn't know what I was getting into. But the more time I spent with people in town, and just being kind of receptive to their suggestions, we were able to connect and produce some of these objects. And it's kind of a beautiful part of the project. It's a beautiful part of the interaction we had, and is accessible in ways that goes beyond just a gallery presentation. I love the idea that some random traveler is purchasing this postcard produced by one of the residents. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times, photographers, and artists generally, I think, feed off this idea that they need to be in the studio, and they need, it's not this kind of collaborative process. So yeah, whenever you find things that you can, you're not working with an artist per se or in a collaboration, but you're working with the community, and they're kind of helping build this project as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So, what was that?
No, I was just agreeing with you. So the one thing that I guess I would just maybe add to that is, as the project has evolved, as much as there is kind of traditional photographic elements, I would say there's just as much non-photographic elements that are very, very collaborative in nature, or directly inspired by an encounter that I had with individuals from town.
Yeah, and it would be great if we could, during the summers at the Snipe Museum, we don't exhibit any work in the gallery. So it may be even, I can't make any promises, but it'd be great if we can get, more of your, the variety of work that you do produce into a gallery for the summer, for the local community to kind of check out as well. So I'll definitely check into that, once the residency kind of winds down, and maybe we can, try to plan to kind of put some stuff together with that too.
Right.
So Clarissa, if you have other questions you want to ask Jon, feel free. But we're going to start winding things down.
I think the last thing, sorry, this is not Clarissa talking right now.
Yeah.
Last thing I want to reference, just because it's fun to talk about, don't pay attention to, don't look at that, look at this, and then Clarissa, you can ask your question. Sorry to interject.
Yeah.
But I do kind of love referencing this piece. And again, it really speaks to the idea of distance. So for anyone who's not previously introduced to the project, one of the initiatives I gave myself when I went to town was to be open to exploring different pathways towards happiness, and how one might come to define that, whether they be whatever shape that might take. Some might define it in terms of more sacred terms. Some might, in more experimental and thrill-seeking terms, and just be there kind of for the ride. And kind of an unusual part of my own history was that prior to going to Bliss, I had never had an alcoholic beverage in my life. And going there to pursue those pathways to happiness, I thought, well, this is the perfect opportunity to do so. So I actually had my first beer in the Bliss Saloon, and it was a setup event where I contacted the owner of the saloon and just said, I want to come in, I want to have a beer, and I want to document the moment. And she said, okay, somebody will be there to meet you. And I was actually lucky enough that the woman that was working the bar on the day that I had the drink was a woman named Cinderella. She only goes by the name Cinderella, spelled Cndrlla. And she also has a license plate with that on it. So my first beer that I ever drank in my life was served to me by Cinderella in the Bliss Saloon, which that sentence alone is something that I kind of love. But I left with the bottle thinking, maybe I'll display the bottle as some artifact of that experience. And it was a good year before I kind of really realized what I needed to do with that bottle. So I had the opportunity to work with a glass blower who took that beer bottle, melted it down, and reshaped it into the form of a glass slipper. And it was, again, this moment to kind of honor this occasion, this interaction, or this moment of engagement with one of the residents. So I love the idea that my first beer bottle with Cinderella is kind of now memorialized with this glass slipper. It's set behind a vitrine, and you can see that there's text over it. That there was a short narrative I wrote that got sandblasted into the sides of the glass of the vitrine that just kind of detailed the story of the encounter. But I just kind of love, again, that there's this little tiny glass slipper with a lot of bumps and bruises in it, but it became this very kind of poetically charged object for me. So again, as much as there's photographic elements to this work, there's all of these other contributing pieces as well. Okay, Clarissa.
I guess my question, because there's so many non-photographic elements,
Yeah.
it would be really amazing to see this work in person. And I know I missed it, unfortunately, when it was in Milwaukee last year. So I guess my question would be, like, do you have any, especially in the Midwest, exhibitions for this work coming up where people can check it out in person?
In terms of, I guess the quick answer to that is not really. in a way that I can really kind of explore the complexities of the project.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have some of the photographs on display in a small university gallery outside of Milwaukee within the next few weeks. But there's just some, scale, sometimes can have an effect on how complex the installation can get.
Yeah.
Scale. And it's kind of an interesting thing because I still consider the project to be in progress 3.5 years in, and I do see the end of it coming, the end of the production of it coming. So it's had kind of multiple moments of exhibition. But I've been slow to really, really pursue that until it's kind of complete. And now is the moment actually where I'm beginning to pursue that very actively. So I don't have anything planned really in the Midwest. I've a show, a prospective show out east coming up with the work. But I'm actively looking for traveling it around at the moment.
Great. Well, I'm sure you'll let me know next time it'll be around.
I will do so. Yeah, anybody listening out there?
Well, we had one other active attendee, but he said that he's at work and it's very loud, so he didn't want to kind of jump in. But I think we'll wrap it up. Great conversation. I'm glad Clarissa was able to join us to ask some other questions. Jon, I appreciate you coming on and having this discussion online.
Yeah, thank you.
Hoping to have a lot more of these. And I know Clarissa's on kind of our schedule also, and I think we'll take some of your advice about having maybe bringing on other photographers to kind of ask you questions about your project, and then maybe kind of flip it over and do similar thing with other photographers in the future. So if there's no other questions or anything else you want to comment on, I think we'll just wrap it up.
What do you got, Clarissa?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I've seen you talk about this work a few times, and
right. How did this one hold up?
It was good. It was great. I was actually one of the questions that I had was actually about the dog picture. So I was going to ask specifically about that one. So I'm, glad you addressed it. I was curious. I've always been kind of curious about that photograph.
Yeah, fruit snacks.
Yeah.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you for the conversation. I love having the opportunity to talk about the work. It's been a very fun project to build. So any chance I can talk about it is a good time.
Yeah, and we'll definitely have you on again, at another point also. I mean, with these residencies, we definitely want to build a relationship with all the artists that we get involved with the residency and follow them along, as your, career develops and, new projects come up. And so we'll definitely be, remain in contact, for the indefinite future. And, once the residency is done too, we'll definitely have you back on here and talk about that. And we'll probably do a lot of other things related to the residency as well, if we can get you on board with it, so, but yeah, thanks. And,
just like the Bliss project, I can go back to the residency like 5 times, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think they'll have you anytime you want. Yeah. Great. Okay. Well, we'll wrap it up. And thanks again, Jon, and thanks again, Clarissa and Chris, who is also on, but is unavailable for Q&A. But and we'll do this in another week. So we're going to try to do this every Thursday. Well, starting now, we're going to try to do this every Thursday. That's when the museum's open later, and it's a better environment for me to do these, video kind of artist talks. So we'll do them on Thursday nights, starting next week at 6, and then we're going to add in some Tuesday nights too. We have a pretty full schedule if anybody wants to go look at it on the Facebook page. And I think next time we'll do some kind of housekeeping at the beginning so everybody knows exactly how the program works, because there's ways to, raise your hand during the meeting and things like that. So if someone has a specific question, I can pop them in too. So, but thanks again, Jon. Thanks again, everybody. And we'll always be in contact. So just keep an eye out for the next show.
Great.
Fantastic.
Have a good night.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you too. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.